Hello.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Writing on the Wall Enterprise Hub event with our current writer on the block, Gulran Mia. Tonight, I will be joined by our writer, who I will introduce shortly. But before we get going, I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping. So my name's Amy Carrington. I can already see a few familiar faces, but hello to anybody who I haven't met before. A huge welcome. I'm one of the project managers at Writing on the Wall. I mostly look after our adult education and skills development offer. So projects like Write to Work, which is currently live for applications, I'll tell you about that later, Write What's Next and Enterprise Hub. And it's all about supporting writers in our community and further afield to develop their skills in writing, their confidence, and to find pathways into employment. So we are live on YouTube, so if you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your camera. But if you do feel comfortable to do so, please turn it on, because we love to see your faces, and it's much nicer in the Zoom room if we've got lots of friendly faces looking back at us. We do advise that you watch it in gallery view, and then later on when we get to the questions section, you can switch to, the other way around, speaker view, and then you can switch to gallery view so you can see everybody. Our wonderful Georgia, one of our project workers, is teching the event tonight, and Lauren is, there she is, she's giving you a wave, and Lauren is our moderator. So they are here to help you with anything to do with tech. So if you're struggling with anything, just message them directly in the chat. And if you do have a question later, you'll be able to message Lauren as well. We want everybody to feel comfortable in this space and to make sure it's comfortable for all. So keeping with WOW values, we do ask that you treat everybody with respect, which I know you will. And later on, there is a question and answer section, so you can ask your questions in two ways. You can type it directly into the chat to myself or to Lauren, and I'll read it out for you. Or if you're feeling really brave, you can use the raised hand function, and we will bring you onto the screen and unmute you, and you can ask your question directly. So firstly, what is Enterprise Hub? It is a fantastic programme which provides 12 hours of free business support to Liverpool City residents. Writing on the Wall is the only creative partner of Enterprise Hub, and because it's a huge partnership across the city, and we can offer you an initial consultation about your business idea, your freelance plan. I used to put my teeth in this today, guys, sorry about that. Or your existing business, and then connect you to a main hub who will assign you with a relevant business advisor, and it's completely free. This is an incredible offer, and it's here for you. Today, we're going to be finding our niche as a writer with Gulran. And for those of you who have not met her yet, Gulran is a writer and theatre maker and one half of the Thelmas, a female-led theatre company devoted to empowering women to readdress the inequality in the arts. She writes for stage and screen, specialising in developing new work through devising and writing with young people and community groups. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming. We're really excited to have you with us for the next hour. So I just thought we'd get started with one of those questions that I'm sure you get asked a million times, but we'll take a slightly different angle. So rather than what did your journey start as a writer, can you tell us a little bit about when you took yourself seriously as a writer?
I mean, that's a really funny question, because I don't know if I still don't know if I take myself seriously. And I don't really know what that will look like, but when I do. But I think the first time I took myself seriously as a creative writer was probably when we the filmers realised that there was something in our plans to produce Coconut as a full-length version, and we applied to a number of schemes and opportunities, including Park Theatre Script Accelerator, and at that point New Diorama were doing well, I mean, now they're doing tons, but at that point they were offering free space for people from various communities that were underrepresented in the arts. And I think let me go back a step, sorry. I had a summer where I read an article that I think was in The Guardian about how women don't apply for things until something is perfect, whereas men are just like, oh, I could do that, and like tap it off and send it. So I had a summer of applications where I basically applied for like 3 jobs, I think, and 5 artistic opportunities. And maybe that was the moment I took myself seriously, actually, because I was like, do you know what? That article was really galvanizing, in that nobody can give me permission. I have to give myself permission. So yeah, I read it and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. So I found some things over the summer and I just applied, and I ended up getting 1 of the jobs and then 2 out of 3 of the artistic opportunities, I think. And yeah, we made a small version of Coconut that was longer than the first time it went on stage, which was a 15-minute one-woman show. And just watching audiences respond to it, I was like, oh my God, I think this is going to happen. I think this might be good, and I think people might want to come and see it. And that sort of was the start of that, I'd say.
Yeah, fantastic. I find it really interesting to ask this question because, you know, I've worked with over 200 emerging writers in the last two years, or maybe a little bit less than that. And one of the main things that often people say in a group is, well, I don't think of myself as a writer. And they've told me about some of the things they've written, they've told me about what they want to do. And I just think, well, you are a writer. You know, that is who you are. And I think there's always this kind of nervousness to call yourself that. And I just always wonder about people's moment where they go, no, I can do this, and this is what I am. And the first time you say it to somebody as well. So yeah, absolutely. So in terms of like when you were pursuing that for your profession, you wrote that with your collaborator, and then you started shopping it around. Is that when that kind of stepped on for you? So you were writing constantly, and then you made Coconut, and then you...
Well, I think I think me personally, it's really difficult to say when did that become my profession, because I had the privilege and the joy of my day jobs being, I am a creative facilitator. I'm trained in educational theatre, so I've been working in schools with young people doing little projects here and there, all that were paid. So essentially, I was making money doing theatre, and I had a job leading the youth theatre at the Space Arts Centre, which is a small fringe theatre on the Isle of Dogs in London, and then made my way up to sort of doing more engagement and participation work with them. So, and then also I was a copywriter for a friend who runs a digital marketing agency. So essentially most of my life was creative anyway. I had that joy. I think the last time I did a part-time job was probably Christmas of 2015 or 2016. So maybe that it kind of all feeds into the same thing. So I already had this sense of life was a bit chaotic, but at least it was creative, and I was making money doing the things that I enjoyed. But I definitely didn't feel like a professional writer. And that didn't come until, I think, maybe even after Coconut had gone on tour in 2018. I had personal circumstances which meant that I had to quit all of my jobs, because I thought I was moving to Manchester, and I did sort of part-time And that led to some really great opportunities. I started on the BBC Writers' Room Northern Voices. I was asked to write a play for the Manchester Royal Exchange's Young Company, and sort of when you get one of those jobs, then you end up getting a lot more. So that was the first time I was completely freelance, and I think in that moment, in like September 2018, I thought I'm not going to take on any more part-time jobs if I don't need to, and that included copywriting. So I left copywriting and sort of switched that up for more facilitation work, I guess. And even now, like I'm doing this residency, I teach the young people's playwriting course for the National Theatre, and I teach on the for Central School of Speech and Drama. And, you know, I think I maybe would write more if I didn't do those jobs, but also because that's where my passion is and sort of that's what my background was, I feel like it's all part of the same pot.
Yeah, definitely. That kind of leads me really nicely on to my next question, which is about the kind of importance of finding a community of writers or a collaborator who you can kind of pursue things with. And obviously you've done that, and you've got your own theatre company. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So the Thelmas is essentially myself and Maddie Moore, who's the artistic director. And Maddie and I are both trained in applied theatre, and I think we met quite some time ago at one of those audition interviews for a really great charity that does drama work out in Bosnia. Wow. And I think the joke goes that I got the job and she didn't. But neither of us ended up going to Bosnia because the project didn't happen. And yes, London's a massive city, but you end up seeing the same people over and over again. And we end up on the short play circuit together quite a lot, her directing shorts, me writing shorts. And by 2014, she'd already set up the Thelmas and was planning on doing this evening of one-woman shorts called Lady Log. And you know, we'd hung out a lot and we were probably mates by that point, but we'd never worked together. So it was her that said to me, hey, do you want to write a short play? And I was like, yeah, of course, because, you know, that's what I'm doing right now. And she was the first person to sort of ask me to write something that I wasn't writing about, or give me permission to write something that I thought nobody'd be interested in. And that's sort of where the play Coconut came from. And we realized that we were both the kind of people that needed someone else to get stuff done. I mean, I already knew that, and I think she already knew that. But when we realized that Coconut was probably going to go forwards, and we had talked a lot about the other jobs in our life, mainly participation work, it sort of became a natural coming together of me just joining the Thelmas and seeing if we could bring things together in terms of like the work that we wanted to produce and do and put out there. And it's sort of been just a roller coaster since then. But sort of speaking to the idea of a community and a network, I really believe that's really important. I think I was 16 and I went to a book signing in Romford, where I'm from, and where Martina Cole happens to be from. And I'd read a lot of her novels when I was younger. And I remember really proudly telling her I want to be a writer. And she said to me that I should join a writers group, because you have to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable about sharing your work. And I think that completely changed. I don't know what it changed, but it did something for me. And I'm really not good with criticism, right? I'm really not. But I've learned how to sort of request that and how to find the constructive in the criticism. But I think I would be even worse had I not been going to a writers group in some form since the age of 16. And I went to the Havering Writers Circle, and I think they still exist, bless them. And there was this bolshy like teenage angst poet reading these just dreadful things, and everyone was so wonderful and supportive, and it was great. uh, yeah, and then I just think like that's the way that you find community and networks and collaborators, and everything that I've done since then has sort of been a building block on top of the next one, the last one. I mean, so I went from doing like a writers group to at the Haven Writers Circle, to going to university and then coming back and then joining the Queen's Theatre. I used to have a playwriting group. So yeah, I've always just relied on other people, I guess, to motivate me.
I think it's got so many strengths to being part of kind of a writing group or a writing community, particularly because you're kind of banishing those myths that, you know, you need to be a writer in a lighthouse, like tapping away, completely isolated, because obviously sometimes, you know, writing is a solo activity often, and we have to be sat there doing that. But having a group that you can go back to that motivates you to write, that supports you, but also tells you the truth, gives you that feedback. It's one of the things that we practice in our various courses, because it's a skill, isn't it, to give feedback and also to request and receive it. And you have to practice that skill and develop it, because nobody is going to be perfect at that straight away. You know, it's very difficult to take feedback. So really kind of appreciate that. But definitely one of the strengths of this group.
Yeah, and then just to say, like, I think by 2017, Maddie and I had been to so many writers group and received so much unconstructive feedback that we then, the Thelmas, decided to set up our own writers group. And, you know, up till last summer, even it ran through the pandemic online as well. And we've got a really specific way that we've developed, mostly off resources that Maddie's come across, in how we give feedback. And it's so important that you deliver feedback in a way that helps a writer figure out what they want to say and how to do it in the best way for them, as opposed to just telling them what you want them to do. Because, you know, if you want to write that play, then you go and write that play, but maybe that's not what the writer wants. So I think writers groups are very, very helpful and useful, as long as they are done in a way that is helpful and useful and constructive and not really damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult as well, isn't it, finding that line, because once you get past a point where people are giving you feedback you don't need anymore, that's it's another thing you're learning to recognise and say, actually, I'm going to trust myself on this one, thanks. Brilliant. So other things I'd like to talk about then is generally kind of like your artist practice. So, you know, what's it look like for you to sit down and look at a project, write a project, and get into the practicalities of
that? Sorry, repeat the question, or like?
Talking about artist practice, I think one of the, just to kind of flesh that out a little bit, is that when we're talking to people, carving out the time to write in their day can look very different for everybody, of course, particularly if you have other responsibilities or you might be living with a health condition that you need to consider. So can you talk a little bit about what your writing practice is for yourself? How do you make the time for yourself in the day?
Yeah, sure. I think first and foremost, something that I've only done recently, and that was when I was working with my ADHD coach over sort of like overcoming burnout and stress. She asked me that if I had criteria for saying yes, and I found that a ludicrous question. I was like, who says no?
Yeah.
And you know, if you say yes to everything, then that means you're automatically saying no to something. So I think whilst that feels like it's really relevant as a professional artist that, you know, is trying to have an independent freelance career as well as running a company, I think it also matters to every individual, even if you're starting out. So if you, and I hate like that, there's a whole conversation still going on around, you know, everybody has 24 hours in a day. That's just not true. There are so many things that influence our usable hours, or spoons, if you'd like to call them. So I think it's, in terms of artistic practice, it's finding out how many usable and fair free hours that you have, And B, if you say yes to something, what are you saying no to? So if you're consistently saying yes to things that you don't need to, then that means you're not allowing yourself time to build a practice. So that's the first thing. I learned what my criteria for saying yes is. So now I give all of my energy to things that are either going to satisfy me financially, satisfy my soul, or be in line with things that will allow me to achieve my goals. Practically speaking, I'm a big fan of an organisation called the London Writers' Salon. I've mentioned them before. They do something called the Writers' Hour. It's free, and it's 8 a.m. around the world, basically. So 8 a.m. London time, 8 a.m. East Coast USA, 8 a.m. West Coast USA, and then I think they do 8 a.m. Australia. You just log into Zoom. You have a welcoming ritual. You set your intentions. You write for 50 minutes, and there's a checkout. And on days where I have nothing in the diary and I should just be getting on with work, I tend to log on 3 times, because if I don't do anything else, at least I've done 3 hours of solid work, which doesn't sound like it's a lot, but really when you think about how much work we actually do in a day, it's not very much. And so I've done that today. Today was a writing day, and I think I wrote for about 4.5 hours, which is, pretty decent. It's about 2.5 scenes and some research and some thinking. So I'm a really great advocate for putting things in to the diary in terms of writing time, and also having a regular thing. So most days start at 8 a.m. and I'll do my morning pages with the Writers' Salon. And morning pages, for those of you who don't know, comes from the Artist Way. I've totally blanked on her name, sorry. Julia Cameron. And ideally it's 3 pages longhand. It's just journaling, and it's really helpful for me because I have 200,000 thoughts a minute. So to get them out on paper means that there's more space to find the coherent thoughts later in the day, I guess.
Yeah, definitely getting it on the page. It's something we use in like pretty much every workshop we do. We always have. Sometimes we don't do like 3 pages, morning pages. We'll just do a 5-minute writing burst and just whatever's in your head, get it out. And it also it sort of gets you going for the actual workshop and takes away your nerves sometimes, I think.
Yeah, and then I think I regularly schedule in. I call them idea audits. So I just write down a list of everything that I have on right now, and then sort of ideas that I'm really excited by and what stage they're at. And then sometimes there'll be a jiggle about, because when you're waiting for notes, or if something's pushed back, then you're like, well, actually I have space in my brain and my schedule to be thinking about something new, or I'll bring this idea that was on the back burner because my collaborator was busy, he's now available, so let's like tackle that for a week, and then I'll shelve it back again. And it also depends what the Thelmas have on, like there's always something to do, a funding application to be done, so it's just about it's a lot of checking. Like I feel like I'm constantly organizing myself, but it is about like balancing what pays the bills versus what will potentially pay the bills if I manage to pull it off, versus I have no idea whether this will be lucrative at all, but I really like it, so I'm going to give it some of my time, if that makes sense. Those are the 3 categories I feel that I have.
Yeah, I think
pays the bills, might pay the bills in the future. I have no idea what this is, but I like it. And then the Thelmas.
Yeah, and I think that's really nice as well, because just to have that moment you said before about the ideas that you're excited about, like, sometimes that might be one that's going to make you money, but like you said, it also might just be one that you want to do to pursue because it's exciting, and that kind of feeds the fire, doesn't it, for more creative work. Brilliant. So the title of our event today was Finding Your Niche. So I'm going to ask you, how do you do that from your perspective for our audience?
So I think it's about what you're passionate about, like what do you actually want to spend your time doing, and then what are you good at, and sort of what other experiences do you have that can feed in to your writing or your artistic practice. Because I think there's very few just writers in the world today. Okay, fine, you know, those that have got bestsellers or are making blockbusters or are, you know, consistently working in television, maybe. But for the rest of us, until we get that big break, it's a hustle. And so I like to think of my career as a big part of what I enjoy, which is, you know, hopefully in this half an hour we've sort of covered. And it's that thing of what can I add into that part that that A, gives me a direction, and then maybe B, sets me apart from the two God knows how many other people that are trying to achieve the same thing. And I think that comes from what you're interested in, what you're good at, and then sort of what your experience is and what your voice is.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I can give you an example. My niche very much is in terms of theatre is the themes that I like to write about. So a lot of feminist issues, a lot of intersectional feminist issues, specifically with the Thelmas, and then also the fact that I've worked so much with young people. I have a voice that naturally lends itself to writing for teens because I enjoy magic realism and I love rom-coms. So
yeah, me too.
But it's about knowing yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. And everybody who's with us now, if you just want to take a second to write a couple of those questions that Gularana mentioned there, which is what are you good at? What do you enjoy? And what experience do you have? What can you bring to it? What can you bring to your part? Just to repeat them. Okay, lovely. So if we
can I add one more thing in? Sorry, I just looked at my notes. I think I had to. Okay, I generally, when I work with new writers, I ask them the question, or new creatives, do you want to be successful or do you want to be famous? And I think it's a really difficult question to answer because everybody wants to be famous. But actually, what we should be aiming for is success, and then also working out what success looks like for you. So in terms of success for me is being paid to write with in all of those fields that I've talked about. I think if I never had a play on at the National Theatre, which is a goal, if I never got a TV series, which is another goal, but I got to work with company or organisations who I've worked with and only got to write plays for young people for the rest of my life, and that paid me, I'd be really, really happy, and I'd consider that a success. I'll give you an example for an act. Like, I've spoken to actors and it's easier for them. They're like, oh, I want to be famous. I'm like, but so you want to be famous and you want to hold out for that thing that might make you, or do you want to consistently be doing jobs in theatre and education and regional tours, in like adverts? I don't know. There's so many ways to be working, and we just have this very narrow-minded version of like what it means to be successful. So just to add to your list of questions, what does success look like for me?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so if we kind of think about this is the questions you're asking yourself right at the beginning. Now you've got all of those questions answered, you've got your writing talent, you might have got a bit of a portfolio. If you're moving into making yourself a professional writer, what are those kind of steps you need to be thinking about?
So I think like come off the back of sort of like some of those other questions that we said, I think it's really important to know, once you've worked out what success looks like for you, sort of what are some of your goals, and then how you break them down into smaller steps and setting yourself milestones so you know that you're on track. For me, it was a case of just looking for opportunities that fit in to what I enjoyed. There's some great resources like artsjobs.org.uk, I think it is, has a list of just creative opportunities. I mean, where like we're still in the middle of a pandemic, so these opportunities are fewer, but they are out there. The BBC Writers' Room has an opportunities page, which goes from everything that the BBC itself is offering to other people can list the projects that they are hiring for, or you can pitch for on that page. So it's just about sort of having a look where the opportunities are, and then applying to as many things as you can, and really knowing why you want a particular opportunity or what it might do for you, or if it's a paid job, how all the experience that you have matches what they're looking for. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be necessarily relevant, I think, is the most important thing. I mean, what did I get? I worked with an organization called Peer Productions, and I'd never done audio before that, and they were looking for writers to write little audio pieces that they recorded live. But I was just so excited by the prospect of it, because it was called Forgotten Women, and it included a day at the Bishopsgate Centre. I don't know if that's what it's called, I'm sorry. And we got a day with a specialist who talked us through like feminist protest. I was like, this is incredible. So I get to work with young people, I get to write an audio drama that's going to be recorded, and I get a day at the Bishopsgate Institute, that's it, learning about feminist protest. I'm like, this is literally my jam, and I get paid for it. Great. And essentially that's what I wrote in my application. I was like, yeah, I've written some stuff, I have got one professional play produced, but like, forget all of that, this is what I want to do. And I think it's that enthusiasm and really knowing yourself that kind of pushes people to take you seriously. It was great. I loved it.
Yes, incredible.
I mean, when I listen to it now, I'm like, I would write something so much better. But that's not the point. That was quite a few years ago. But yeah, it was like one of the first things that I applied for, and I got, and I was just like, this is great.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds incredible. I want to go. Lovely. So I think the other thing to say there, just to answer that question myself, is Enterprise Hub is a free business service for you. It's 12 hours of free advice. And it's a space for you to kind of take yourself seriously as a professional writer and start those first steps as well. So that's something that's available to everybody who lives in the LCR. So in terms of we've now got ourselves seriously as a writer, we're applying. How do you put yourself out there?
I think having a CV that reflects everything that we talked about. So what I didn't say was the answer to some of those first sets of questions you can turn into like an artistic statement, and I'm still working on mine, and I don't know how many years into my career, but it's good to have like a paragraph where you're able to express what you're interested in and what your niche is, and you know, some of those things that encapsulate who you are. So for example, I think on part of mine I like to write stories. I like to tell stories that celebrate, not stereotype, and that addresses the fact that, you know, I'm all about authentic representation. So when somebody sees that, they know that they're not going to get what is expected, and they'll get a nice little surprise. Fun fact. Oh no, I can't. I don't know if I can share that. I got approached. My agent got approached for a writing gig about somebody that had been in the news and was quite controversial. And my agent sent it to me, and I was like, do they know who I am? Like, do they know that I'm not going to give them what they want? And he was like, I don't think they do. I said, can you just send them my artist statement, please? And then I got an email back being like, yeah, no, they don't want to work with you. I was like, nah, I don't think they would. Like,
I didn't think we were a good fit. Oh, funny. Okay, so that's definitely a good shout then, isn't it? Because that you can use that in your CV, you can use it to align your views and your work with other collaborators in fun.
Yeah, and then so on from that, like, I mean, I know it's a game and everybody hates it, but if you can bear it, social media, and just sort of have maybe one medium, one platform where it is about work and sort of everything that you're, not to say to like censor yourself, but just, so I started off using Twitter a lot for work, which meant that I followed a lot of theatre companies and writers and directors that I was interested in working with, and that obviously would then turned into TV stuff and following production companies. And I'm not saying that you can't tweet about anything other than writing or your creative career, but just once you've got that platform and sort of like are getting attention on it, then it's actually very helpful. Like, I've got a lot of work off tweeting incessantly, or a lot of people are looking for writers, and then you can just tweet a short thing about yourself or just add yourself into the mix. And yeah, that, like, I hate it that we get work through Twitter, but it really does help. And then what you're doing is doing that whole thing of building a brand, like, this is who you are, this is what you're interested in. So I tweet a lot about like women's issues, about politics. Most of my Twitter, well, some of my Twitter is NSFW. Like, I wouldn't necessarily, which is really interesting because obviously I work with organizations that work with young people, but politics is politics, and I'm not tweeting. Anyway, we've got off the subject, sorry. What I'm trying to say is that if there is a way of putting yourself out there that is in line, sort of like everything that you're passionate about, if it's on social media, then that I would recommend doing that. I think that's a good way to get noticed, as is networking, those groups. Every time you do a project or you do a workshop online, in person, do we remember what those feel like? Talk about yourself confidently, give out your details, give out your social media handles. Yeah, because like work comes from, people give work to people that they like, and I hate to say that, but it's true. So or people that they feel confident will pull it off, or they've met and they're like, do you know what, that person is really sassy, I think they can do this. So put yourself in places that maybe you feel uncomfortable in and see what happens.
Yeah, and bet on yourself, because then
definitely. Like, I've so many times I've thought about, should I add my name to this mix, and I've not, and then somebody else has tagged me in it, and I was like, oh, okay, well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also like one of those kind of confidence things, isn't it? It's like, I've had quite a few conversations of, well, okay, I've built my portfolio, I've done things in exchange for testimonials, experience and things like that. However, when do I start charging for my writing, this craft that I'm doing? And how much do I charge? And I'm always like, okay, you can go by kind of, the national average or find something like that. But I would always make sure that you don't kind of undersell yourself. Like, once you've done that, it's time to be paid for the work that you're doing and your kind of creativity. So don't undersell yourself at that point.
No, absolutely not. And that's one of my like pet peeves on like, so there's also Facebook groups like Playwriting UK and stuff like that, where people, post about themselves, sell their dramaturgy services, things like that. And there's always one person who's just starting out who wants to like undercut everyone else's rates because they feel like that's the best way. They're going for quantity over quality. And it's like, well, it's really unhelpful when you come in and want to charge £30 to read a script, and I'm over here with a day rate of £250 because I've earned that. And it's taken me a long time to get there, and it's devaluing what that process is. So yeah, definitely have confidence in yourself. If you know you're good and you've got the testimonials to back it up, set your day rate, put it up every so often and demand payment. Artists need to eat too.
Definitely. So we talked a little bit there about not Facebook specifically, sorry to give a shout out to Facebook there. Social media.
I'm talking about Twitter constantly, but
social media, and the importance of thinking about your audience for your writing in that sense, in terms of like finding work and finding commissions. But could you tell us a little bit about how you think about your audience when you're writing your creative work? Is that a huge influence for you? You said that you write a lot for teens.
I mean, I want to say I don't think about my audience, but that's not true at all. I think about how I want my audience to feel at different stages in the thing that I'm writing. And I think that informs the storytelling, and that informs how I'll structure a story. But like if it's teens, then, you know, that's a very specific audience in that there's certain things that you can't do or say. And yeah, allow that to sort of inform it. I wrote a play with and for a group of Bangladeshi women called Rightful Place Theatre, and they were quite conservative. Well, their audience was quite conservative, so there was no swearing at all. I was like, what? They're adults. You've not met me. I'm so sweary, guys. Come on. And also it had to be like there were certain things that they wanted to talk about what it meant to be a Bangladeshi woman, but they also didn't want to like, what is the word? They didn't want to dehumanize certain members of their community or like point fingers or lay blame. So that was a real big conversation that we had about, okay, our audience is somebody that we're trying to convince of something, but also we don't want to offend them in doing so. So what I'm trying to say is if there's a very specific audience in mind, then yes, of course, I'll tailor what I'm writing to what they might need. Otherwise, it's just about like, what experience do I want them to have? And then a play that I'm writing about right now, I don't care about the audience at all. I'm like, it's not about you. It's about my character. So yeah.
That's awesome.
If that was helpful, sorry.
No, it was absolutely. It's just one of those questions we get asked a lot is, do I have to think about it? And it's obviously one of those questions it's different every time. Sorry, no easy answer there.
Okay, so I've got a better answer, and like this goes back to why are you writing your story? Like what are you writing? Who are you writing it for? And how are you going to reach them? So this is very big in like theatre when you have to do audience development work, which obviously the Thelmas do because we're a company. So in terms of, yeah, you absolutely need to know who your audience is. You don't necessarily need, it's a different kind of thing. Like I wouldn't necessarily tailor it to them, but I know for me, and that comes back to what's my measure of success. So if my audience is a group of Bangladeshi women, how do I then market the show or do the work around it to get them in, as opposed to like allowing that to inform the storytelling, if that makes sense. So there's two different ideas of audience and how I deal with that.
Yeah. And how you basically invite them in.
Yes.
And they're engaging with the content. Okay, awesome. I've got one more question, but just a reminder that we are going to open up the questions to everybody in the room today. So if you would like to ask a question, think of it now, pop it in the chat, or you can also raise your hand in a few minutes and come on and ask it directly if you want to. So my final question is, you've talked a lot about, not in this event, but in previous events, about humour in your writing. And I wanted to ask the question, can you learn to be funny? Can you learn to write funny? Or do you think it's all about having a developed sense of humour that you're learning to bring to your writing?
I'm not funny. I find everything funny. I can't tell jokes. I think for me, humour comes from observation, which is why I find people like Michael McIntyre really funny. That thing of or May. Sorry, it's that time of day where like words escape me. So for me, humor comes from just being really, really honest and just saying it as it is, because people find that difficult and awkward, and then they're like, ha 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 ha, oh, that's really funny, because it's true, right? So yeah, I I don't know if you can, I don't know if you can learn to be funny, but I also don't know essentially how to be funny other than just saying things how they are, or finding like a sense of irony in things, or just putting things together that are a bit odd, and you're like, okay, sorry, that's so unhelpful.
No, I think it's just interesting because I think that I agree with you. I think situational humor is really funny, and pointing that out is, like you said, just kind of making it truthful, because people are strange. I'm sorry, but often we are. We're strange beings, and we do funny stuff all the time. So yeah, that makes sense.
I'm just going to very quickly Google the name of a comedian that when I was doing the BBC Writers' Room, we had a session on comedy, and I think her name's Grain Maguire. It's an Irish name and I can't pronounce it, so I'm really sorry. She took us through this whole exercise of constructing a joke in response to a news story. And I kid you not, the activity could take up to 3 days. And she outlined how you do it. And it's about thinking about every potential response that a human being could have to like an image, and then writing that all down and then making connections and observations and putting them together. And it blew my mind, and it gave me so much respect for actual comedians, because I realized how difficult it is to put together a joke or a funny story. And I was like, that's intense. So maybe if you did a workshop with her, you could learn how to be funny. But yeah, this is just to say that comedy is really difficult and I don't understand it.
Yeah, you do achieve it. So it's one of those myths that kind of happen. If you've got a second, would you mind just typing
sure
into the chat? Let's just ask for it there. Lovely. So I'm going to change my view to gallery so I can see everybody. Hello. Does anybody have any questions for Gularana? And does anybody want to be brave and come on with us? Becca, you're looking like you're thinking about it. Would you like to come on and ask a question? Yes. Oh, fantastic. Please come on. Georgia will unmute you now.
Thank you. Gularana. So I've been, I'm starting to get paid a tiny bit for some writing, so it doesn't feel like an expensive self-indulgent hobby too much, or it really does. But anyway, I was offered to by somebody to write a play, but it's a full length-ish play, sort of 60 minutes. Nothing like the sort of ITC Writers Guild rates, but I really want to do it, and I know I'm going to do it. But I just think this is really hard, without an agent. And how do you? And I don't feel like I can negotiate, because so many people want to be writers. How on earth do we try and negotiate, or do we think no, then they'll get someone else? How did you used to negotiate that when you were starting?
It makes me so angry. And it's exactly that mentality that people employ to not pay writers. Look, at the end of the day, you have to make an informed decision. How much work is it going to be? What if you say yes to this, what are you saying no to? What happens if you ask for more money and they say no? Without knowing the details of it, it's very difficult for me to weigh in. And I wonder, are you just asking for validation to say yes to it? I think if you want to say yes to it, you say yes to it, right? We do the things that feed our soul. If you're worried about whether this is ruining opportunities for future writers, that's not really your job to do that. You don't have to take on that weight and that responsibility. Is it going to get you through what you need to get through and up to the next level? That's what you need to ask yourself. And are you brave enough to maybe say, yes, I will take this, but I really would like you to reconsider the next time that you that you offer a writer a gig, that you pay them fairly, or have a conversation about how can we generate more money? Is there somebody in the organisation that can apply for Arts Council funding? Can I work with you to try and find money from another pot? Because everyone deserves to be paid, and if they're going to be selling tickets and they're going to be making money, you know, you can also ask whether they'll operate on an open book accounting, and therefore you get to see what's coming in and what's coming out for whatever the production is. And so if they are making profit off you, then you can ask for a percentage of that. I heartily recommend, I know it's an expense, but joining the Writers Guild of Great Britain as a fledgling writer. You can send them your contract or your agreement and they will highlight everything that's wrong with it, but you can also just call them up and say, I just need to talk to somebody about how I feel about this. And full disclosure, I do sit on the Equality and Diversity Committee for the Writers Guild, so I am a big proponent for them, but honestly, that's because I feel like this is what they're here for, to support us.
Thank you so much. It's one of those things that you just want to go la 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 la, but I've got to really think about it. And thank you for those points. That's brilliant.
No worries.
Thanks, Rebecca. I think I saw another hand pop up, and I think it was Patrick. Patrick, would you like to go next? Maybe if Georgia could unmute us.
Okay, yeah, I'm unmuted now. You know me, Amy, I've always got something to say, and I actually forgot what I was going to ask, believe it or not, and that's just like threw me. But I'm going to just think on my feet and just ask any old question. Well, not any old question, but you touched on something before, just on something you spoke about, where I'm not quite sure if you gave the full answer to it, but you said that you received, when you was in these writing groups, a lot of unconstructive feedback. And I was just hoping for a greater insight into that. Not actually what they said, but what do you mean by that? Was that people putting you off your style type of thing and what you want to do and trying to silence your voice as a writer? That's what I took from it. Because I wouldn't say I've had similar experiences, but if that's the interpretation, then yeah. So,
I think the experiences that led me to like question whether all feedback was helpful was when it came from a person or a place of not understanding a lived or a cultural experience or a specific experience in the script, and what they were doing. There's a really particular example I have in my head, which was they were telling me, I don't think a woman or this character would react like that. And there was a few lines in like 10 pages. And this discussion went on for a very long time. And I was just like, I'm sorry, man, have you had a miscarriage? Do you know what it feels like? I mean, it doesn't for me either. This was back when I was very young and I was writing from outside my experience. We've had that conversation in previous writer's block chats. But this man had much less of an understanding of that character than I did, and essentially just kept going round and round the around the road about like how he didn't think that my character would speak like that. And I was just like,
Yeah.
This is so unhelpful. This is so unhelpful. It's like 3 lines. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And
Just wanting to be right and talking you down, basically.
wanting to be right, talking you down, or like having really strong opinions on what the work should be for them. And I think I encountered that a lot. Like, I think you should tell it this way.
Yeah.
And that was when Maddie and I were like, and directors and dramaturgs do it too. Like, I think it should be like this. So we were like, that's not helpful, because a writer is trying to achieve something, and unless what you're offering is supporting them to get to where they want to go, then it's just distracting or detracting from the work that they've done, and that's difficult and pointless.
No, okay, that's a great answer, and thanks. Because when you first mentioned it, I was thinking, wow, because there has to be that balance between constructive criticism and feedback, and what you said is just clear unconstructive down to narrow-mindedness, basically.
Sorry.
No, I'm just thinking they know it all and they must be right because you've come to them and they're in this particular position when, you know, it should be a two-way system to a degree.
Yeah, Sheila's asked in the chat, are there links on how to give constructive feedback?
Okay, thanks anyway.
Thank you, Patrick. I don't know if there's links. I've never Googled, but I would say that how I like to receive feedback is I like people to tell me what stood out for them, what they enjoyed, what worked in a script or a piece of writing that I've written. And so then, you know, there's something positive, because you all need that little bit of boost, and then ask questions, and that's how the Thelmas operate. Everything is a question. So instead of telling me that they think that, instead of telling a writer that you think that they should tell their story backwards, you can ask a question that says, what is the audience's understanding of the story if it was not told in a linear fashion? Because that to me might be like, oh, actually I could tell it like middle, beginning and end, which opens up lots more possibilities for me than just saying, I think you should tell the story backwards. The Thelmas are yet to, like, we've got a strict structure on how we do our feedback. We haven't written it down yet. We might do that and make it available. I don't know. I'll talk to Maddie. But I think the biggest thing is not being prescriptive and saying, I think, or this is my suggestion. Also, have you thought about what if this character did this instead? Or consider, when I write script reports, that's quite often like, consider how this character might feel if so-and-so were to happen. Yes, in the chat, Mark Ravenhill is great at tweeting advice for feedback givers.
Brilliant. So also I'd just like to say that we do that a lot with the Writer's Block, with Enterprisehub, with Right to Work. It's one of the things we always work on. And if you are starting out for the very first time, either giving or receiving feedback, obviously do it with somebody that you trust their opinion and respect their opinion. And also you can dictate what you want in terms of feedback. Like, we always do like a bit of a scale. So if you're feeling particularly delicate, if you're not used to having feedback and you've just shared something for the first time, you can literally just ask for what they liked in the work. And then you can build it up for yourself. You know, next time you go in and you say, okay, where do you think, you know, where are your questions? Like Glorana just said.
Yeah,
okay.
And then, sorry, just to add in also, depending on your temperament or your constitution, you might prefer it in feedback, in person, so you can see somebody's face when they're giving feedback, or you might prefer it in writing. I like both. I like either a face-to-face conversation followed up by a written notes, or if I receive written notes, I like to have the opportunity to be able to run them past somebody, so I know I'm not getting the wrong end of the stick, which happened to me when I was writing my short film and I had a freak out and my script editor was ill. and I couldn't talk to her. I had a small meltdown.
Blame yourself, tell me. Okay, I'm just conscious of, I can't believe how quickly this hour has gone.
I know, I talk too much, sorry.
No, not at all. All the answers have been fantastic and it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. We have got a couple of questions, so I wonder if we could do a little speed round.
Yeah, we can.
Just so we don't go too far over. So how do you strike the balance between setting the big goals you want to achieve, but not putting too much pressure on yourself?
I have a post-it note for this. So one thing that you should know about me is I've gone through a lot of like upheaval in the last few years, and I've done therapy and coaching. So I have lots of like things on post-it notes to remind me of stuff like this. So I'll give you these two side by side. The first is keep your goals in mind. And the second is what's the middle ground. These might be coming up backwards for you, I'm not too sure. So in answer to that question, if you want to get towards your goals but you don't want to put too much pressure on yourself, what is the middle ground? So what is a small step that you can take instead of the big step that you'd like to take but actually might prove to be very difficult? So it's slow and steady. I guess progress, not perfection, is another one. I did have that on a post-it note. I don't know where that's gone. So instead of being like, yes, I'm going to do this big thing that's going to take up all of my time and might lead to failure, not that that's a word that I would use, versus this little thing that won't get me quite as far, but actually is a good way of dipping my feet into the water, I would always go for the latter option.
Perfect, thank you. Next question, when do you know a story has to be written? How do you decide which of your ideas is worth devoting time to? It says ideas too, but maybe idea in time.
If something has to be written, then it has to be written, and I know because it's like just there, and it's always there, and I will subconsciously pursue television or music or articles or books around that theme, and I just can't get it out of my head. So I'm like, okay, it has to be done. And it might be a case of, which is what is happening with the big play that I'm writing now, where I sort of like just splurt something out to meet a deadline. So I knew I wanted to apply for the Old Vic 12 back in 2019, and I had this idea and I just hadn't spent enough time on it. So I just sort of like vomited a one-page pitch. And then that got long listed and I got invited to interview, and then it got shortlisted, which meant I had to do a lot of work on it. But then I set it aside because it was just so big, I didn't have the skills to do it. So that's when that thing of like the ideas audit, and you jigsaw and Tetris them into play and take them back out again. How do you decide which of your ideas is worth devoting time to? That's when the goals come in mind. So I have an idea, like I want to write a series of personal essays, but I don't have time to do that. I don't know anyone in publishing. Is it going to help me right now? No. So I just have an Evernote notebook and I put ideas in it. Every so often they come up, and at some point, maybe when I'm 50, it'll be more like a memoir and it'll be great. Versus the like 3 TV ideas that I have that are going, that are headed towards major development. So those get more of my time. I hope that makes sense. And sorry, I answer everything with a personal response. That's the neurodiversity. It's the only way I know how to do it.
That's amazing, and why I'm sure everybody is here, so thank you very much. And then final question, do you write other things or mainly play and script?
So I write for performance, which is stage, screen, and some audio. I would like to write personal essays, but I don't have the time or the inclination right now. Oh, and I write really bad teenage poetry. And if you go on my Instagram, I still write really bad teenage poetry, but that's okay. It's my one indulgence.
Definitely. Well, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you for your questions. Thank you very much, Gloriana. Thank you so much for coming in. I would just like to say, why not? Why not email me and find out more about Enterprise Hub? My email address is amy@writingonthewall.org.uk. You can go to our website if you prefer and have a little read of it there, which is www.writingonthewall.org.uk, and it's under projects. It's called Enterprise Hub. I'm sure one of the lovely people that are working with us tonight will pop a link in the chat for ease. It's completely free and it can help you with a range of practical steps for your creative business. It's available to all LCR residents over 16 years old. You can be employed, unemployed, in full-time education, or even already registered as a freelancer. You just cannot be registered for more than 3 years. So thank you so much for the amazing and excellent advice tonight. It's been fantastic to talk to you. I'd just like to say thanks to our audience, thanks to our funders at Enterprise Hub, which is the European Regional Development Fund. Massive thank you to our audience. And obviously we can't let you get away without doing a monitoring form. Please tell us what you thought about the event. Lauren will pop the link into the chat. It only takes 3 minutes to fill it out, and it provides us with essential information about who is engaging with our events, and all the feedback that you give us does shape the future events at WOW, so please do. You can catch our wonderful writer on the block next on Monday the 24th at 6 p.m. Go to our website to book your free tickets, and thank you very much everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Yay! That was so much fun. Thanks.
I think we're still live. We're still live.